It's been routinely thought of as one of the worst MLB stadiums the past 2 decades, but was it doomed from the start, from the moment it broke ground in St. Petersburg, Florida? We're going to go through the whole history of Tropicana Field, take a look at some rare photos from when it was the Florida Suncoast Dome in the 90s. Then it was changed to the Thunderdome. So Tropicana Field breaks ground. There it is right there. Almost looks like a circus. Pretty fitting. It is very clownish, but no, I like the Trop just because it's so ridiculous. I have been to it. You can see some early construction photos. I found this photo, which is just amazing, off of Twitter. Oh my goodness, would you look at that? Let there be light. There's light into the Trop. They should have left those windows. That's when all the seats were being installed. It was being built in 1989. You can see how the seats, used to go so far back. They've had several renovations we're going to talk about. The original capacity of the Trop was over 45K. Today, with the upper deck closed, it's at 25,000. Like I said earlier, it opened in 1990 as the Florida Suncoast Dome in an effort to lure an MLB team to Florida. The original thought was maybe they could get the White Sox with the White Sox at the old Comiskey Park, but once they were able to fund what now is currently Guaranteed Rate Field, that didn't become an option. It became the Thunderdome in 1993 when the Tampa Bay Lightning, the NHL team, moved in, and then in 1996 with the Tampa Bay Rays, it becomes Tropicana Field, and that name has stuck. Apparently the naming rights expire in 2026, so maybe the Trop will be no more, but you would figure in 2027 Tampa Bay probably should have a new stadium at that point, so maybe a new name comes with the new stadium. But either way, guys, just taking a look at the Trop, the cost of it, I mean, this thing was destined to fail. So the original cost of Tropicana Field, $130 million, which in today's money is around $290 million, if I'm estimating with inflation, maybe 280. It is remarkably low. And remember, this was built in St. Petersburg without an MLB team. They were hoping to get one. This is a very similar situation to Oklahoma City when it comes to them building an arena in the early 2000s, which later became Chesapeake Arena. They kind of built a shell of an arena that didn't have a ton of, fancy suites or anything like that. They wanted to get a professional sports franchise, but they didn't have the guarantee of it, so they couldn't invest the money into it. The same thing happened with the Trop, and when it comes to the roof choice, this was the late 80s. It's unfortunate. We know how obsolete that design is. It looks like the Metrodome. It's got one of those really retro roofs. They had determined that based on the location in Florida, the humidity, the weather, it wasn't possible for them to do an outdoor stadium. We've seen the Lone Depot Park debacle, them having a retractable roof and it only being open 2% of the time. I think for Tampa Bay, the best solution is to have some type of translucent see-through roof in their new stadium. But just taking a look at some of the photos, you guys can see the early photos of the Trop. The big, large upper deck. This place, again, originally set 45,000 people, and it still can sit 42K if they removed every one of the tarps. But the reason is because that upper deck just branches out so far. This stadium was modeled after the Kansas City Royals Kauffman Stadium, and you can kind of see the upper deck is in the same kind of way to where it jets down and forms almost like a 35-degree angle at the end of each side. And then they did have a renovation, just taking a look at the outfield seating. So you've got two very similar compartments in left field and right field. And originally, it went back really far and it almost formed kind of a half circle with the way the seating went. And what they did is they chopped off the last 10 to 14 rows, or probably 20 rows, and put in a little standing room area, things like that. And there also is a little exclusive area, bleacher seats, second deck in left field that a lot of people don't know about. They also do have the Stingray tank, something kind of cool I found on Wikipedia. You can see the recent players to hit home runs into the Stingray tank. In 2021, I guess people were getting angry that maybe the Stingrays could get dinged by a home run, so they had to put a netting over it, but that is probably the most unique aspect of the Trop. And look at that, the most beautiful images I could find of Tropicana Field. It's a Christmas lighting display. Yes, wow. I mean, that is nice. You know, you got the nice little ceiling lit up. Very, very beautiful there. But apparently they do those events. And how about, imagine if the Trop had something like that. Dude, you're better off just don't do that. I mean, that is probably the worst design I have seen in my life when it comes. I thought that was funny. Imagine if they did something like that. That just looks so bad. But there you can see the Trop. Yes, it did host a World Series. Remember when David Price was like a 20-year-old phenom when the Rays made the World Series, I believe with Evan Longoria. You can see it does look like a giant mass of people when the tarps are off and that thing is filled. They also did replace some of the upper seating in the upper deck with bleacher seats. I'm not sure why they did that, but there's just a better view of all the tarps, them tarping off sections of the upper deck. And recently, starting last year, they did start just completely closing the upper deck because it didn't make sense for them to have it open and have workers be up there, have to clean up there because there was such a limited crowd. With the idea that they might be moving, there's been more of a fan motivation for more people to show up to the Tampa Bay Rays games, along with the Rays starting out unbelievably well. It's caused a rejuvenation amongst the fan base. And now, this was announced about a month ago, they will be opening the upper deck, and it was open for the Yankee series at least. So, you know, the Rays, I think it's probably 50-50, maybe 60-40 that they'll be able to stay put and get a new stadium. I don't love the site. You can also see, this was just another, they have like 100 of these different random renderings. This looks like a really interesting one that I've never seen, so I just wanted to show it. Just when I was randomly looking on Google for photos of the Trop, I found this rendering. Looks like just like a giant office building almost with a bunch of glass. I thought it was, I don't know, kind of an interesting little thing there. But when it comes to the question, was the Trop doomed from the start because there was not a guarantee of an MLB team? They were trying to build it to lure an MLB team, but they couldn't fully go all out and really invest into the stadium. That's why it only cost around $270 million in today's dollars. For reference, the new Las Vegas A's stadium, if it gets built, will be $1.5 billion. So you're talking about a stadium, significantly 5-6 times more in terms of cost. That is one of the big reasons. And then the other issue is it got to the point with the Trop where they've been thinking about a new stadium since like 2008. Tampa Bay has, because, do you want to renovate it? There was the idea of them renovating it. They were going to rip out a bunch of sections in the upper deck and put on possibly a retractable roof. It's just going to cost too much money. You're way better off just building a new stadium than spending $500 million or $300 million on a retractable roof. It doesn't make any sense. So they're kind of in this weird period now. And unfortunately, I just wanted to kind of do this video. Maybe I'll do a video like this about just putting a stadium in the spotlight and kind of talking about the history. The other thing I wanted to show was the capacity based, year by year. So you can see it opens 45K. Well, that wasn't when it opened. That was in 1998, the earliest capacity they had on it. It basically stayed right around the upper 40s, 43, 44K, all the way to 2006. 2007, it sees a decrease in seating. I'm actually not sure what renovation that was exactly. And then the big renovation that happened in 2014, I know they removed 3,000 seats, but you can see it's been the seats have been getting removed as it goes on. And then in 2019, that number 25,000, that is an unofficial number because they closed the upper deck. So if the upper deck is closed, the total capacity is only 25K, but with the upper deck open, I believe it is around 31,000. And then if they remove all the tarps off of the upper deck, meaning if Tampa Bay makes the playoffs, they make the World Series this year, you could fit almost 43K into it, which is very acceptable for modern standards. It's just kind of a shame that Tampa Bay still plays here, but it is a classic stadium. It's something that everyone likes to talk about, Tropicana Field. When I visited when I was younger, I went to Florida. We went to Sarasota, Florida, and we did see a Rays game. It was a 4:10 afternoon game in St. Petersburg. And the one thing that I really remember from the Trop was the concourses. It reminded me of like an amusement park. It was a really strange vibe. I don't know if they've remodeled the concessions at all, but it looked like a theme park. You know, it's very weird, but either way, that is Trop. I guess that kind of fits the Trop, though, honestly. But either way, that is the story of Tropicana Field officially opening March 3rd, 1990, eventually getting the Rays, also hosting some different, college football events. You had some minor league football games. And the architect of it was the HOK Sport Group, based out of Kansas City. Again, kind of taking the idea that it would be based off of Kauffman Stadium. There are the tenants. You can see the Tampa Bay Storm, an AFL team for 5 years. You had the Tampa Bay Lightning for 3, and then the Rays move in 1998. St. Petersburg Bowl, that doesn't exist anymore. And then the WWE Thunderdome for a little year, 2020 to 2021. I wonder if that had something to do with the pandemic. And then you can also see kind of how the turf has changed as well. The AstroTurf, completely out of date. That was only 1 year. They immediately changed it after Tampa Bay's first year there to the field turf for 10 years. That got obsolete. They go back to AstroTurf game day grass. It was a little bit bouncy, if you remember, back in the mid 200s, like 2007, 2008. It was bouncy, but then they switched to that game day grass, and it became less bouncy. And now they have the new modern stuff that's not bouncy at all. And then the dimensions of it, I would say it definitely is more hitter friendly, but it's not crazy. I'm sure a lot of people remember that Evan Longoria, last game of the season home run down the left field line, left center 370, center field 404, right center is also 370. So very standard to the gaps, and then right field 322, maybe a little shallow there. But that is the story of Tropicana Field. I am guessing, just assuming, 2027, maybe 2026 or 2027 will be Tropicana Field's last year after the Rays move out of it, whether it's right across the street to a new ballpark or maybe they move to Orlando in a relocation event. The Trop is very likely going to get torn down and demolished. Just at this point, there's really no use for it. It reminds me, at least the ceiling and the roof, reminds me of the Metrodome, and those things tend to just get torn down immediately. So guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.